Okay, hello. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Sacred Parenting Summit, where parents of adolescents are discovering ways to awaken personal power, both within themselves and their kids. And today I'm here with Shelley Klammer, and Shelley has a powerful way of facilitating emotional healing through the expressive arts. So welcome, Shelley.
Thank you, Adina.
So
Happy
happy
to
to
be
have you with
here.
us today. Um, how about we begin by having you share a bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay. I am a counselor and I have a private practice in beautiful, picturesque small town in the mountains of Canada. And I've just finished a long stint of being an artist in healthcare in the big city. So we just moved back to a small, beautiful, peaceful town, and I just opened up my private practice. And I also have a very busy online expressive arts practice where I'm an educator and I teach courses on how to express spontaneously through art and writing in a way that supports people to express their authentic selves and also to heal emotionally. So
Wonderful.
that is what I'm doing. Yeah.
All great stuff. And so the work that you do gives people amazing opportunities for self-exploration and self-expression. And I'm wondering if you can share your thoughts on how that relates to parenting. How can parents do this work in a way that connects them better to their kids?
Right. Well, I think that spontaneous art is a way to kind of uncover our authentic self, in that we normally approach art from a sort of a social self, like we try to do, usually we'll try to create something that looks really beautiful that other people will like. And so I love to create art directives that sort of kind of entices people to express things that they might not normally know about themselves, like buried emotions or aspects of self that don't really have their day in the social structures that they live in. So I think how it relates to parenting is authenticity has always been such a huge value for me as a parent. So with my daughter, well before I was facilitating expressive art for other people, I was facilitating it for her, like right from when she was little. So I had her drawing her feelings when she was, 2, 3 years old, and I have some really profound drawings from that time. And I also set up a joint studio space where I had kind of hoped that she would be more into the art like I was, and I had a little art table for her, but she very soon told me, no, Mom, I don't like painting. It makes my hands dirty. And so I was trying to condition her when she was little, to spend time in my studio with me. And just wanted a couple of hours to paint. And I thought, well, she could, do her own expression, but, it didn't quite work. She started in on her writing career, and she's a poet today. She's 22, but she very quickly beguiled my attention, charmed me away from my art table. And she would always say, Mommy, write this down. And I have all kinds of stories that she wrote when she was like 3, 4, or 5. And then by the time she was 7 or 8, she was starting to write poetry. So it just sort of happened spontaneously. I thought I would be nurturing an artist in her. That was sort of the vision that I had, but she's definitely a writer.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And that's such a good lesson that does relate to parenting, in that we might have a vision for our children and they might show up in a completely different way. And we as parents have to let go of our own ideas of what we want for them and let them step into who they are naturally.
Absolutely, absolutely. And with my daughter, her name's Hadley, she, I sort of my parenting story around her was that, I was very, very, very living a very conservative sort of traditional lifestyle until I was about 30. I got pregnant when I was 30. And then when I got pregnant with her, all of my repressed emotions started to awaken, which might happen for a lot of pregnant women. You start to cry, you start to get emotional, and everything just broke me wide open. And so, for her, I sort of wanted to give her the opposite, I think, which is what we often want to do as parents. I wanted to give her this opposite experience of this very free, artistic, creative life. But in a sense, she really did better with more structure and more rules and that kind of thing. So, you know, I had started this whole creative life after I got pregnant with her. It was kind of quite an awakening for me of my emotions, and everything sort of changed after I got pregnant with her. And like I said, I was, you know, trying to give her this very free life, and I put her in alternative school, and she just didn't do very well. She wanted to have structure. She wanted to have rules. She wanted to have routines. And so I kind of got to a middle point, like I think we all do as parents, you know? Yeah.
It's fascinating. And going back to what you said about how getting pregnant with her and having her just sort of broke everything wide open for you. And I think sometimes that happens, maybe not in pregnancy, but just through the process of parenting, we become aware of our own stuff, and a lot of our own stuff comes up. And if we have old wounds, particularly from our own childhoods, they can seep into our relationships with our kids. And so how do you think the expressive arts can help a person, A, become aware of that and also work through it?
Well, I had this theory that I was dead sure I was right about when I was raising her. And what it was that my emotional stuff came up at the exact age that I didn't process something. So if she was 4 and I had something at 4, that was an area of pain processing that I had to do. And I've since, as a counselor, seen this across the board, that parents of children, they have to work through their children at certain ages, whether you were, you know, had struggles as a child or a teen, whatever those sort of blind spots, sort of stuffed down, repressed sort of emotional pain is, it will very likely come up when when your child is that particular age. And I've checked in with different people, and often the girls will affect mothers more and boys will affect the fathers more. And so it is a very fierce journey of emotional healing, I think, parenting. You know, if you want to parent wide open without a lot of emotional blind spots, you have to be very aware. You know, if you're feeling triggered, was there something that I didn't process from this age when my son or daughter was this age, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why is this getting triggered for me? And is it really about my child's behavior right now, or is it something about that's inside of me?
Yes.
And when you
Exactly. Like when my daughter was a teenager, she's 22. You go ahead.
mentioned some technical issues, I think a little bit, so forgive me if I'm not responding right away. Hopefully it'll be okay. I'm just noticing some freezing up a little bit, and I hope it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying about the journey of parenting, here you are at this later phase of parenting. Your daughter is out and on her own. You've raised her. Can you talk a little bit about the journey and what that was like? And I guess let's start there.
Okay. Yeah, it's my journey. Well, like I said, I would really call myself quite conservative and inhibited, really, till I got pregnant. You know, I was married. I was doing all the traditional things. I was a successful gallery artist, and you know, my mom's passed on, but I affectionately refer to her as, you know, sort of a Martha Stewart. You know, like we did. Our life had a sort of a perfection to it, in a sense. You know, like the decorating of the kitchen Christmas tree with the homemade cookies and the homemade everything, and just this very, very sort of beautiful, seeming very traditional life. And I thought I was happy until I got pregnant, and then my emotions, everything that I had repressed, started to come up, and I just started to do some kind of radical things in my life. It was just, I pulled my art out of the art gallery that I was showing. I had my big solo show coming up, and I thought, I can't paint this way anymore. And so I started to secretively create art, drawing and painting in my basement. It was very spontaneous. It was really not pretty. It wasn't anything I'd want to show anybody. And I just felt compelled to write, to dance. And so this all really was preparing me, I think, for a very, very big spiritual opening, which happened about a year after my daughter was born. 5 of my beloved family members, close family members, died suddenly in a year. And my marriage wasn't going well, so I left my marriage. And all of a sudden, I think it was very crisis-induced, and I think this happens for people when they go through intense crisis. But I started to have these visions of my life that were completely different than what I had planned. And so I was having prophetic dreams, and it lasted for about 3 months, and it was an absolutely amazing period where I didn't give a hoot about social convention. I thought, you know, so many people in my family have died. How do I want to live my life? How do I, you know, I had really tamped down my power as a woman, and I wanted to just have this big, beautiful, creative life. And so I opened up to that, and I actually fell in love with my life partner after I left my marriage very soon after. And so my daughter was raised by 2 women, and we're both counselors. So you can imagine the parenting journey. My daughter talks about how we did a lot of emotional processing and a lot of expressive art and a lot of journaling and all of that kind of thing. So probably a little more to her liking, but I know she likes it now. I know she misses it. But we did a lot of emotional work in her parenting journey. We were counselors in training, and we were trying everything out. And I was trying to navigate a difficult divorce, and so there was just a lot of emotional stuff. So it was just like a big emotional soup, and I was doing my best to work on all the emotions that I had repressed for 30 years, and I was also doing my best to support her. So, you know, I think the best that I could do was kind of, I just sort of turned my own medicine on her. And really that's how I became an expressive arts facilitator. Really, like I would just sit and before I was working full time in healthcare, I started to just dream up art directives. And I've since found that I have this real gift. Like I can just come up with endless expressive art.
That's so cool.
And so she would come home, and we had a little studio in the house, and we had the house set up really like we had a music studio, and we had a yoga, this big old rambly house. And she would come home, and we would do a little journal directive or a little art directive. And that's kind of how I raised her. I sort of brought her along with my purpose. You know, I just sort of, this is what I want to learn, so I'll teach what I want to learn. And that's just kind of how we lived our life. You know, we did lots of family workshops, and every holiday had a collage workshop involved in it, you know, that kind of thing.
It sounds beautiful and very much fun. It sounds like parenting for you came like right at the time of this incredible transformative journey, I guess. And your parenting coincided and went along with that. And your daughter was on that transformational journey with you throughout her childhood.
You know, she was, and it was really interesting because I moved away from my hometown. I started this whole new creative life, and I think for her, that was a challenge. You know, when a child is sort of inculcated in your belly, and you're thinking you're going to have this one kind of life, which I was. You know, I was just like planning this long-term, very traditional wife life, you know. And when all the members of my family just passed away so suddenly, it was like, oh my goodness, how do I really want to raise my daughter? And how, you know, why was I crying all the time when I was pregnant with her? And what do I need to change? So I think for her, maybe for her nervous system, it must have been a big, huge change, because all of a sudden, you know, I grew up like you did, you know, with grandparents nearby, and, you know, she had a whole different, you know, kind of upbringing. We did get way more conservative when we moved to the big city, and I started working in a government sort of healthcare situation and put her in normal school. But I mean, there was a time when we were living in the woods raising goats, and she was going to school in the woods and carting wool, and you know?
Great.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was great, but, I think that she could feel the family history in her bones, and also having this huge turnaround and this huge shift was interesting, I would imagine, for her, because I think a lot of children are born into a lineage and there might not be a lot of change, and so she had a lot of shifting early on in her, age 1 and 2. It's a big turnaround all of a sudden.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah.
So now that she is on her own and you've been through the adolescent years and then helped launch her into her own life, what advice do you have for parents who are struggling with their kids getting older and the idea of saying goodbye or letting go?
I thought that when you wrote me and I read that question, I thought that was such a beautiful question, because I think that we all start to think about that when our kids hit the teen years, because we put so much, like I remember, when my kids were about, or when Hadley was, my daughter was about your kid's age, and she started to pull away from me, that early teen stage where she just started to want to have her birthday parties on her own without me. And I was very involved in just every aspect of her life. And so, the teenage years is a slow pulling away. And there was complications, in her teen years. There's too many factors to mention here, in that, we were in a big city, and parents of children who have been in a divorce would kind of sense into what I mean, how challenging it is when you're not in relationship, or even like a great or good relationship with your ex. There's huge challenges around that. And so she had a lot of questions for me in her teen years. So her teen years were really challenging for me, and I think challenging for her. And she had a big gap in her psyche around not seeing her dad very much. He was always off working and traveling around, and so for her, I really had to sort of sit back and take my dreams and needs and wants out of our relationship when she was a teen, and just like really look at what does she psychologically need. And to me, I felt like she needed to get to know her dad. So I really insisted that she go spend her last year in high school with her dad, which was really hard for me. I missed her terribly, listened to her favorite radio station every day when she was gone. It was so challenging, but it has rounded out her character in a way that is quite profound, like where she had missing pieces before. Because I think anybody who doesn't know a parent very well, you need to see them warts and all, and you need to experience how they fit into your inner world. And because I had sort of gone off into this whole new life when she was basically 2 to the time she was 17, I thought she needs to go back into that world and experience it and feel who she is in that world. And I think it really rounded her off, like I said, in a beautiful, beautiful way.
I love that. I think it's so beautiful. And the idea of stepping away from your own needs and wants to keep the focus on what your child needs and wants. That's what we're supposed to do as parents. And oftentimes it gets all tangled up, and that's so hard to do. But especially when they're reaching this age of independence, it's so important to know when we're holding on too tight and when it's best for them to release and let go a little bit. And ultimately our goal is to teach them how to be independent people, successful, happy, independent people in the world, not with us right there. And so we have to take care of ourselves so that we can step out a little bit. So it sounds like that was not easy.
No.
And I just think that's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's really interesting because my mom, I came full circle to understanding how disappointed she was that I didn't stay like a traditional wife and mother, in that I just went off and I did this whole female empowerment thing. I want to earn money. I want to live my purpose and my passion. And, it wasn't anything that she really wanted for me. She wanted me to be near her, and she wanted to do the whole traditional family line like had been done for generations. And, I grew up in small towns and small farm towns, and there was this way of, family continuing and getting together. And so it was very disruptive, I think, but boy, did I ever get it. I really, really got it when I was doing the teen years, and we had this beautiful conversation, actually right before she died. She passed away with cancer, but we had a beautiful conversation and a big cry about how we do have these dreams for our kids, and we wish that they would be a certain way for us so that we could enjoy them in this certain way. But everyone has their own journey. I'm an example of that, and my daughter is an example of that. And I think that's really kind of really the inner fight we have as parents, is that we have this dream of what kind of relationship we want to have with our kids, and somehow that dreamed upon relationship will somehow heal something inside of us, but they actually end up triggering us more in opposite ways, and it's all very healing unto itself, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the foundation of everything that I do. It's just this idea that through parenting, through the act of parenting, we become more self-aware, and we grow in such important and necessary ways, as in.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. I just I think back and I think, even when I was a little girl, I knew I was going to have a daughter. And it was funny because I planned it all. I picked the father of my child out of the Sears catalog. When he showed up, he looked exactly like that. I was like, you're the father of my baby. And then my story unfolded after that. But it really, I had so many dreams, but yet, letting her and my partner so encouraged me, because it was so funny. When my daughter was little, I was trying to become this empowered woman, and I was trying to get out of lace and pink and all of that. And my partner was like, she wants to wear hot pink gumboos and that pink lacy dress, so you just let her wear that. Here I am thinking I'm molding her in this great way, but she really just had her own mind and wanted to do her own thing. Yeah.
So another thing I wanted to ask you about, you have worked with people of various ages and abilities, and I think that I love that, and I think that art is such a great unifier. So can you talk a little bit about the work that you've done with different populations?
Yes. Well, I love to say that I've literally facilitated art for people from the age of 2 to the age of 102, because I worked in care and I did facilitate art for a 102-year-old man. So we did, when I was getting to know you, I found out you love intergenerational work, and that's one of your passions. And I got to experience that a lot in healthcare, bringing in little children and creating art projects for the older folks and the youngins. And so that was a real amazing blessing to work with. And as for just, making sure, it's interesting because it's challenging. It was challenging to provide opportunities for my daughter to actually make art with all kinds of different people other than what we did in our home and in our family. There wasn't a lot of opportunities out there. So there are facilitators that are doing more intergenerational work, but it's not just a given, is it? Right now, it's not a normal thing.
No, and I was going to ask you, what are some suggestions that you might have for how families can create together? And it might even be wonderful for it would be wonderful for families to create together intergenerationally too, and invite the grandparents, if there are grandparents, and the little ones, and everyone kind of together. What suggestions would you have for people who want to do something like that but just don't know where to start?
Well, yeah, it's so interesting to me, because to me it's my normal to facilitate an art party, right? So I always turn my my gaze to collage, because that's one expressive arts modality that I find translates across all ages and all generations. Like, everybody can cut pictures out and everybody can spontaneously put them together. And I used to do these little dream envelopes every year where I would set out a white envelope and ask everyone to collage and decorate on the envelope, and then just I would have these little recipe cards with questions and ask them to answer them and put collage in them, and we'd seal them up to the next year. And so something like that, like little time capsule things where you're putting your dreams and wishes into an envelope, and then it's so fun to find them again the next year and open them up. So that's one activity that we did a lot as a family. So
yeah, I love that. That sounds wonderful. And what a great way to preserve a moment in time.
Yes.
I guess, that is what a time capsule is, but to be able to then go back and reflect with it, after loved ones may have passed on or no longer are
Absolutely.
with you, you still have a piece of them with you, and that's really, really
Absolutely. Yes.
So the next thing I wanted to ask you, since we're talking about adolescence and the teenage years, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about what your teenage years were like. You had mentioned that that's when stuff comes up as parents, when we had something going on. And part of my intention with asking this question of everyone is to sort of help parents think about that for themselves as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also wondering if you could go back to that time and say something to yourself or your parents, what would it be?
Well, I look back on my teen years. I was a teen pageant queen. I was a model. I didn't rebel at all. I was nice. I was socially careful. I fit into every group. I could fit in at any party, but yet I didn't have really much of a self. And so, anytime, because I lived in a small farm community, anytime I sort of ventured out of that persona and started to express any sort of feminine power or anything, I did get bullied for my brightness, for my light, for sort of stepping up and bringing that confidence forth. And I'm sure a lot of women know this, right? So they've felt this. So looking back on my teen years, I didn't start expressing myself until I got pregnant with my daughter. And then I think that sadness of not wanting to raise her in a way, I had this baby in my belly, and I thought, I don't want to raise my daughter in a way that she can't express herself fully, So in a sense, maybe her childhood was overexpressed, and that we did art every day. We did a lot of processing, dancing, and all kinds of stuff. But I feel very passionate about teens and providing opportunities for teens to authentically express. That's been a real area of deep heart passion for me. In my therapy practice and my expressive arts practice, I facilitated art for teens in jail, and it was one of the most fulfilling thing I ever did, where it was just an open studio creative period, and I did a summer school session with them. And so what would I say? This is so challenging because I know what it feels like to be very inhibited. I know what it feels like to be very socially self-conscious. I know what it feels like to think the outer is so much bigger and more important than the inner. So my task, I felt as a parent, was to just really foster my daughter's inner life. And of course, I was working full time, so she was in public school and experiencing all kinds of peer pressure, like everybody does. It's so simple to say, express all of who you are, express yourself, but it's not easy. It's not easy in our society, in our culture, to express differences. And I had a real taste of that from being very socially conventional and then having just more of an alternative lifestyle and experiencing something quite opposite to that. So I sort of feel like I've had a real taste of both sides. And I feel compassion for both sides. It feels good to fit in. It feels good to be loved. It feels good to fit in, but it doesn't feel good to not be able to say who you are either. So there has to be some kind of a middle ground.
Yeah. And hopefully those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. You know, you can fit in
Exactly.
and have community and be
Yeah.
accepted and embraced, and also authentically be who you are, even if who you
Yeah.
are is not conventional or society's, you know, normal.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I think it is that, you know, the spontaneous art and writing practices, when you're writing your truth, when you're drawing your truth, you get used to expressing your truth. And there is a joy that comes from that strength. And it wasn't an inner strength that I had any kind of knowledge of or development, you know, as a teen. I just knew how to fit in perfectly. And that was my goal. You know, but by the time I was 30, I'd had enough of that. It was like, okay, all the emotions I've repressed for 30 years need to come up now.
Yeah, wow, that's kind of
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm wondering, so everybody is creative.
Hmm.
People don't always realize that about themselves, or they'll say I'm not creative when they're a fantastic cook, or there's just so many ways that creativity comes forth. But
Yes.
what do you say to people who are resistant to the expressing themselves through the arts, no matter what art form it is, because they think they can't do it or they're no good at it?
Hmm. Well, I have ways for people to create. I live to create ways for people to um, enjoy, you know, a spontaneous art making process. But given that, not everybody does. And what I think is just having a deep connection with your inner core is, you know, whether you get it through being in nature or whatever kind of practice. It doesn't have to be, quote, creative, you know, but what I often tell people is that when we're really socially self-conscious, our awareness is kind of in the front of it's kind of out here, right? It can be either way out here or it can be just the kind of the front of our head. And so often I'll tell people kind of go back inside of yourself into your center so that your awareness is in the center of your head and that it goes all the way down your spine. And then you can start to express yourself from there. And that's kind of the aim of all of the spontaneous art and writing that I teach, is that to get you back into that truth. The truth kind of lives in the center, right? In the core of ourselves. And so when we're not being true, I was always very aware that my attention was out here, and I was scanning, looking, you know, like, who's approving of me? Where do I fit? Did I make that person uncomfortable? Oh no, you know, those kinds of things. Uh, but when you come back and you sit back, and it's an interesting feeling because you almost feel like you're kind of falling back if you're not used to it, if you're very socially self-conscious. But if you go back to the center and you start to express from that place, it's very awakening for other people. So when they hear you speak, and when you're speaking your truth, it's like it lights a fire in other people as well. So long story short, whatever you can do to get yourself in there, in that center place, whether it's meditation, whether it's creativity. I'm sure you live in a beautiful natural spot. I'm sure you're very well aware of how to get into that center place, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I love the idea of yeah, tapping into here, and when we're creating or expressing ourselves in a creative way, it's so important to let go of what other people think, because it's not
Yeah.
about what other people think. It's not about making something that's even aesthetically pleasing to anyone.
Mhm.
It's about the process of doing it. um,
Yes,
and
yes, because what happens is when you create honestly or you express honestly, and I think those of us who love the expressive arts, I think we struggle with inhibitions. Like, I honestly do. I think we love to express ourselves, and for me, I express myself daily. It's like brushing my teeth, because
Mhm.
my nervous system default is just to get quite inhibited, and so I do spontaneous things and and I can immediately feel myself falling back into my center, and like, oh, I'm attached to my truth, because it's like an ego nervous system default for me to be really like inhibited. So it's a practice. It's a practice to get to love the feeling of your own truth. And once you fall in love with the feeling of your own truth, then that awakens other people. And that's what joins us, is truth to truth. We join, but, you know, mask to mask, we don't really join, and it's very empty. So no matter how different we are, we really are the same in the center, you know. And I've worked with tons of people from all kinds of walks of life, and when you meet center to center, it really doesn't matter if you have different ideas about what's right and what's wrong socially. There's a true connection that comes from that center to center meeting. You know.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love that. And as you were speaking, I was thinking to myself, I've always loved to create visual art. It's something that I've always needed to do for my own wellness and processing of life. But I'm so much less comfortable with other expressive forms. I also love to write, but I love the feeling of dancing, but I'm way more self-conscious. And I love the feeling of singing, but I do not want to do it in front of anyone. And so I'm sitting here thinking like how important it also is to do the things that we're not entirely comfortable with and step out of our comfort zones too, because then, you said before that expressing your truth creatively helps you be your authentic self all the time, or something to that effect. And it's the same too with stepping out of your comfort zone. If you can do it in creative ways, you'll be more inclined to do it even in other areas of your life too. And I think that's an important lesson to teach our kids as well. Don't always stay in what's uncomfortable.
Yes, beautifully said, because really our challenge as human beings is to express ourselves authentically in social situations. It's a lot easier to do it by yourself when you're alone. And granted, I did many years of journaling by myself, processing endless amounts of material, you know. But it came to a point where my inner voice said, you have to get out and share this socially. And I did set up the challenge for myself actually to do a lot of expressive dancing as well, and I'm very acutely aware that it is totally a practice for me to be in a social setting and be expressing myself and my body authentically, and yes, it is placing yourself in social settings and expressing authenticity, and that is the healing, because we get wounded when we can't express all of ourselves in our social settings, and so we have to heal in the same way. There comes a time when all the alone inner work has to be taken into a social setting. And I love facilitating groups to provide that purpose, where you come, you express yourself honestly, you're completely accepted for that expression, and that in itself is a healing sort of practice that I like to bring to the world. It's social. The social aspect of it is very important. Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad we mentioned that, because that's something that I don't often think about, but really is key, I think.
Yes. Absolutely.
And I'm wondering, you have so many amazing resources available to people. Can you tell a little bit about what people can find if they visit your website or search for you?
Sure. So I worked, like I said, full-time in healthcare. I was an artist in healthcare, and I worked in an art therapy program that informed a lot of my work. I got to see hundreds of people. I worked with Canadian veterans for many, many years, and I got to see all kinds of people from all kinds of different walks of life, and I got to view hundreds of different kinds of expressive processes and how people express themselves. Of course, everyone's unique, but there's pathways into the spontaneous creative path. So all during that time, I was making little notes in my commute to myself, and I was writing courses about how to spontaneously write and draw and collage and paint. And so I've written a lot of courses. So anything that you can offer online, I can't really teach spontaneous dance or singing so easily online, but I can teach writing and painting and collage and all those things. And so my main focus in everything that I do. I do have a sort of a facilitation section, so I do support expressive arts facilitators to bring their offering to the world. But my true passion ultimately is supporting people to heal emotionally, and that just comes through honest self-expression, like we've said. And so I have all kinds of prompts that incite honest self-expression through writing and art. And I've written, oh my goodness, so many e-courses, probably about 16 e-courses over the last 10 years. And so that's all there.
And those things are appropriate for parents and teenagers, or maybe even in some cases for them to do together.
I have I do get a lot of parents asking me, what courses would be appropriate for teens. I have one that's called Symbolic Journeys, which is just like it's kind of a word and image association and sparking art and writing. I recommend that for early teens. I have some really deep emotional healing courses too. So some teens who are really struggling, their parents will put them in that. And it's really taking a look at emotional pain and the roots of emotional pain and why we struggle and how we need to emotionally, and really working with those arrested parts of self that we leave behind and forget about and stuff down to the basement of our psyche. And then that forms the blind spots of our parenting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. If I could go back to my teen self, I would love to give her she would have eaten it up and really benefited from it. So thank you. So we're just about out of time, but before we wrap up, are there any final thoughts or comments that you would like to share?
Sure. I'll just mention the course that I'm giving for free for your interview series, and it's kind of a slideshow webinar, and it's a walk through my own expressive journals, and it's how I started back in my 20s. I wrote journals like from early teens onward. But when I really started into visual journals, I start with my earliest visual journals and I show how they progressed, and I describe how you can emotionally heal through spontaneous creativity, and I give my own life as an example. And so I have a 3-part webinar series, and I think that is helpful for parents to kind of get a sense of what expressive art journaling looks like, because a lot of people don't really know what it looks like or what it could be or what it is. And so it just talks about starting an expressive journal. It's good for teens too, and what that can look like in a really simple form, and how to sort of pinpoint where you might be in emotional pain, and how to choose art materials to express that emotional pain, and then how to sort of do some positive psychology work after that emotional pain is released. So that's a webinar training that I'm offering to everybody.
Wonderful. That sounds fabulous. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Yes.
So
You're welcome.
Anything else?
Oh, well, I just love, it's so funny, when you connected with me and you said you were going to do a sacred parenting interview series, I had such ideals. I think we all do as parents. I remember I was like nursing my daughter, and I had all my parenting books all the way around me, and I had my journal, and I was writing these manifestos as to how free and beautiful and amazingly I was going to raise my daughter. And it was so fun because when you contacted me, I pulled out those old journals, and I just laughed, and I thought, wow, did I not know what an emotional awakening journey this was going to be? I had it all planned, it was it was going to be this ideal journey. And my mothering magazine stacked up to the ceiling beside me, and we were so idealistic as mothers, I think. And just raising children in the modern world is so challenging. So my heart goes out to everybody who's watching this, and blessings to your parenting journey, your sacred journey. It is sacred, right? It's very sacred, but it's challenging too.
Absolutely. And I think the challenges are what make it sacred. You know, if
I
it were
think
easy,
so.
met all our preconceived ideals,
Yes.
then it wouldn't be transformative. But because it's hard,
Yes.
we're forced to show up in an entirely different way and to learn and grow as human beings in a very profound way. So
Oh, so true. So true. And I so agree with you. I feel like I'll just be standing in the kitchen opening a cupboard and I'll be struck by like, what if I was never a parent? I grew so much through the process. I just wrenched me and stretched me and pulled me apart and put me back together. And it was truly amazing. Yeah.
well, thank you so much for sharing your personal story. I know it meant a lot to me, and I'm sure it did to the people watching as well, and for all the wonderful resources you've made available to us. And I really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you, Shelley.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.